Welcome back to The Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is your host, Kate. Mindsets drive behaviors. This is a simple truth with many nuanced implications for leaders. For one, we have the question of what exactly do you manage? Thoughts or actions? If you see the connection between them, you may be tempted to manage employees' thoughts. But that approach will fail. Your span of control only includes work-related actions. This is the little secret of successful leadership. You don't succeed by focusing on what others think. You grow and achieve when you manage your own mindsets, because how you think about your role, your leadership, will determine how you behave and lead. I'm convinced that this is increasingly true as the workplace becomes even more complex, and that leadership mindsets are both a strategic priority and advantage in modern times. So, how can we, both leaders and the people who support them, identify and adopt the mindsets that will help and not hinder? My guest today works in this very space. He has recognized the need for a kind of corporate mental rewiring and calls the process rewilding. In a recent article, he described it this way: beyond surface-level reforms or incremental improvements, rewilding the corporate mind demands fundamental recalibration of how we understand leadership, power, and organizational purpose. So welcome, Thom. Thank you so much for joining me today. As I've shared, I always like to pause at this point so that my guests can introduce themselves.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kate. I mean, it's really, really great to be with you today. I've sort of bumbled along in the world in a number of different areas. I started out as a lifeguard, in the swimming world, and then I went to flying college, and I was thrown out fairly unceremoniously halfway through because I think I scared my flying instructor. So I did all the ground school for a commercial pilot's license, and very little of the flying. So that took me into industry because I wanted to find a job where I could carry on flying and pay for it myself. And so I ended up in the plastics and rubber industry, and ended up in Scotland actually, setting up a factory at a very young age, which brought all sorts of challenges and learning, which was great. But anyway, when they sent me away to learn about things that really didn't interest me, I found myself in a recruiting office for the Royal Marines, which I was attracted to because a number of my friends from the swimming world had joined the Marines and come back completely altered people, which really impressed me. So a couple of months later, I was in, and much to the consternation of my parents, and that led to 17 years of working in the Marines as an officer. And I ended up doing a lot teaching around leadership, which I hadn't intended to do, but that's sort of how it came about. And I retired, and I ended up in the only coaching organization in the UK at the time, because this is a long time ago. Trained as a coach, and then started to do that and realized that actually I'd been doing a lot of that in the leadership training that I'd been doing in the service. So it all sort of fitted together.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I thought, well, I better actually learn about the theory of this. So I went back to school and did a master's in the psychology of change, essentially. That's not what they called it, but that's really roughly what it was. And that led me in two directions. It led me into the healing world, and I studied Reiki, and it led me into the corporate world, where after a while, could see that what I wanted to do was to take healing into business because I was
Hmm.
coming across so many organizations that were dysfunctional, and they didn't really know how to get themselves out of the muddle that they were in. And really, that's the university gave me a model, individual, group, and organizational, in which to work. And uh, really, I've been doing that work ever since. And as we have discussed before, I've recently started to put all what I've learned together into a book, which I hope to publish very soon.
What a fascinating life story, Tom. Thank you for sharing. I see this theme of seeking challenge go throughout your life, whether it's physical, mental, educational, kind of always wanting something that was going to keep you on your toes, it sounds like.
When you say that, I feel seen. So thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. And again, I love hearing people tell their stories. So you've already made my day, sir. Where I'd like to start, as I've explained, is this concept of rewilding, which, having done a little bit of research in your writing, I think I understand where it's coming from. Uh, but I want to make certain, one, I'm not assuming, and two, it's clear for my listeners. And then there's also the fact that we don't typically associate anything wild with leadership. So I'm going to ask that you explain the concept and what the process of rewilding the corporate mind can entail.
Thank you. And that's the title of the book. So
Mm-hmm.
I I I was well, you get to a certain stage in life and you've got all these different experiences
Mm-hmm.
and they've been bubbling away in the pot, and you've been adding new ingredients, and all of a sudden the soup is ready to serve, if you like. And so
Okay.
um, I was very touched when I heard about um, uh, an estate in the south of England where for 20 years this couple had been trying to make the land work financially, and it, it it simply wasn't going to work because the earth was just chalk, and they were trying to raise cattle. It just wasn't working. And so this couple said, we're going to do what a couple of other organizations have done. I mean, I think it's in Yellowstone in
Mm,
the US. They released wolves back in and
yeah.
just watched what happened. So the sense of rewilding is let's take a step back. Let's stop interfering and let's let nature do what it knows best without us, which at some level is a great level of arrogance that we think we know best.
Mm-hmm.
And 20 years later, the Nep estate is extraordinary. It, it's like an African savanna, the land. And what they found is that all sorts of animals that they thought were either extinct or very soon to become extinct have just turned up there. And uh, they had one uh, desperate, awful bush that started to grow, and they were really worried because it covered a lot of the land. And then the next year, this particular butterfly came, landed, and they laid all their larvae in this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And all this horrible growth just died back and has never come back again. So it's like nature's wisdom flows in ways that we really don't understand yet. And so um, what I'm really curious about is it was sort of back in about 1911 that somebody wrote a book about how to manage organizations. And really, most business schools are still based on that premise that we've got to structure and control things. We think in straight lines. If you think of a river doesn't flow in straight lines. It flows in the ways that actually work best for it, which so it might look as if it's meandering,
Mm-hmm.
but it's its own wisdom. And so there are all sorts of aspects, if you like, of the way that nature works that I think if we apply them in the context of leadership, we begin to have a much more empathetic, a much more unhurried, and yet ultimately more effective, more profitable end result. And so it's those principles that I'm sort of trying to transfer into leadership and how we apply ourselves. I mean, if you look at what's going on in the world today. I
Yes.
mean, it is a
Well,
mess.
it is. It is.
Uh,
It's interesting to me, Tom. I want to say this respectfully, but when we talk about the linear, highly structured, sequential approaches, that is very reflective of the masculine mind. You know, that there is linear thought, point A, point B, all the way to Z or Z, to acknowledge my guest's locale. Um, where, and I know these are sweeping generalizations, and the world is not binary. However, we do know that the physical structures of male and female brains differ. Women have more connections. We approach things more relationally and interconnected. So when you talk about that kind of holistic, allowing the system to form itself, sometimes organically, that seems very, well, yes, to me. There's an obviousness because that is how myself and many of the women leaders I know approach work, approach management. And we are kind of in this time right now where, yes, things are a mess, but we also have the opportunity to make this shift where instead of always applying a masculine approach, I think what we have is an opportunity to become more discerning and to choose what is right and necessary for the circumstance or the work. And it's an exciting time to be, despite the messiness.
yes. In the book, I talk a lot about the masculine and the feminine.
Mm,
But it is masculine and feminine that I talk about rather than male, female,
yeah.
because we all have elements of masculine, we all have
Mm-hmm.
elements of feminine. And so it's the feminine that we need,
Mm-hmm.
which typically is lived out in women, but not entirely. There's plenty of women at the top of organizations. The sadness is that so many of them have got there by being male
Mm-hmm.
and expressing the dysfunctional masculine, which is the accepted way of getting on. We need the feminine, but we don't need to discard the masculine either.
Exactly.
But
We really
both of them
function
need to
best
be,
when both are there.
and but there's a healthy and an unhealthy, and I think that a lot of the feminine that is expressed today is as unhealthy as the masculine,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and so it's really a case of mm, encouraging, teaching, and allowing these things, and uh, particularly with the feminine, I think an awful lot of men now are frightened because they feel like they lose their relevance and their role,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not true. But that there is this sort of real fear. So these things are very complex,
Yes, they are.
and we need to do it gently. And again, this is where nature's way, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the in this sense the masculine way, which is as we used to say in the Marine, stacks of smoke and straight up the middle. But it doesn't work like that.
No, it does not. Yeah, it's I like I really like where the thoughts are leading because you're talking about nature's way. The language I land on as we follow this thread is we don't need masculine or feminine leadership or frameworks. We need human frameworks, something that is natural to how people are with each other. So yeah, I think I'm excited for where the conversation is going to keep going because even though our language might be a little bit different, um, I think we're going to find a really good synergy in our approaches and our thoughts. So, so at NEP Estate, they let the land return to its natural state. What does that look like for a leadership team, though? Because I imagine it can't be quite as hands off.
Well, yes, and Isabella Tree, who was the you know she was one of the two who did this, um, says that sometimes the very best thing you can do is nothing at all.
Yes.
But yeah, and this is an interesting question in terms of how does this apply to a team? And I think I suppose there's a number of different levels one can look at this. We already talked about the attempt to control. I think there's a kind of addiction to control, which is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is grounded in fear of change, fear of losing or control, fear of being insignificant, fear of being fired, uh, uh, and I think in a team, the piece that's missing in all that is trust. You know, when you talk about delegation, then the best delegators are the people who draw some boundaries, but then leave autonomy for individuals to do what's
Mm-hmm.
necessary. And if you like,
Yeah.
the boundaries at NEP, you could say, well, because they don't have the full range of animals, so that there's a hierarchy, and there aren't any lions, there aren't any um, animals at the top of the chain, if you like. So the deer, humans are interfering to that extent to ensure that the numbers don't go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very interesting to when you've got a group of people and some of them say, well, actually, we're not a team. We don't need to be a team. And there's all sorts of reasons might say that. But the whole exploration really is, do we want to be a team, and what are the benefits of that,
Mm-hmm.
of being quote unquote a team, as opposed to just a random group that are brought together because the organization wants them in some way to provide guidance or leadership or whatever. So um, it again, it's this sense of boundarying
Mm-hmm.
things, and in this case, a group of people who really needs to decide what their purpose is. Why would you meet at all? And do we have the right people in the room?
Yeah.
And why are we meeting? What are we trying to achieve? And how does that contribute to the organization?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually just wrote a little piece. I have a soapbox I bring out about meetings on a regular basis because I mean meetings are a tool and they have become the thing that drives how people work as opposed to a tool for getting the work done. And I know we're not talking specifically about meetings, but I think there's an opportunity for the work world to reframe its approach. And some of the questions that have to start that reframing are what you're talking about. Why are we meeting? What are we trying to accomplish? Are the right people here?
Hmm.
So, two concepts I'd like to spend some time on today with you are conscious leadership and then serenity in leadership, which also happens to be the name of your company. So I think it's going to be fun to explore that. Where would you like to start?
Well, I think, I mean, obviously, I like the title Serenity in Leadership. Uh, and someone said to me the other day, that would be a nice thing. Uh, because I think there's an assumption in lots of places that leading is all about rushing. It's needing to be in control. It's needing to know all the answers. And in today's world, you can't do any of that. Not realistically, you can't.
Mm-mm.
People who feel like they have to know all the answers, they they crash and burn often, and then they disappoint.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, you do see it in with some very successful leaders. They acknowledge that they don't know all the answers, but what their skill is in bringing the right people around them and then allowing these other people to take the lead. So that's why I like meeting in circle because
Mm.
it's much easier for leadership to move to whoever is the most appropriate to pick it up at that moment. And the designated overall leader, who might be the CEO or the head of a large department or whatever it is, if they have enough control over their ego, can allow this. It's about allowing, creating the space where the the most appropriate wisdom has the space to emerge. And for the rest of the people in that gathering, it's about listening because so often people uh, kind of listen a little bit, but they do that in order to create their own response,
Yes,
as
we do.
opposed to really listening, which actually happens very little in this world. We don't really listen very much,
Yeah.
but if we do, then uh, I mean, but part of listening is it's a statement of great respect.
I
And
agree.
sometimes, in a meeting, I'll encourage people to say, right, before you say anything that you want to say, you need to repeat back what the last person said. That slows things down. But what it does is it gives that sense of there is a sense of serenity in there. It's like it's a slowing down, an acknowledgement, and it's an allowing of much more wisdom to um, a, appear, to
Hmm.
come up, than otherwise when we're always in such a rush.
Yeah.
And we'll make the decision to move on, which, occasionally if the house is burning down, somebody needs to say, right, we're on fire, everybody out the
Yeah.
door. We don't need a consensus on this. Although it is interesting, I ran an offsite in Houston a few years ago, and we decided to. And now, actually, at the beginning of the meeting, you always said, right, if there's an alarm, da da da, we're going to do this, and the alarm went off.
Oh,
It was a false alarm, but we didn't know that at the time. And so somebody went out the exit, and everybody followed him, and that person missed the turning,
oh
which was
no.
just down the corridor, and carried on into the kitchens and of this huge hotel and everything. And everybody just followed.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh,
Such a great parable of leadership gone wrong.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's it also, speaking of parables and fables, it makes me think of the tortoise and the hare, that fast isn't always the right approach. I like that we keep coming back to this idea of what's right, what's appropriate. The appropriate wisdom can surface. That sometimes, yes, you do need to move very fast. Other times, a steady pace is the right approach. And
Or as we've already said, sometimes not doing anything is the right
mhm,
answer. Uh,
exactly.
and allowing what
Hmm.
wants to emerge. Now, in most businessmen's minds, that is, oh my God, this is going to cost us money. It's we're going to lose. Da, da, da. But actually, that's not always the case.
Yeah. It's not just always the case. It's, I feel one of the things I find so frustrating about human beings in general, but particularly executive leaders, is the short memory, and learning lessons from what you've encountered before. It feels like so many, in my experience, so many leaders have had the opportunity as they've come up to experience things like, we took a little bit of time and it made us faster in the end, or we tried different approaches until we found what fit. And then by the time they reach the C-suite, it's like those lessons have to be left at the door to the suite. And it's like, why can't we attempt this in a way that you would have experienced, that you would have been open to, or even participating in 10, 15, 20 years ago? Yeah, I know it is a human foible that we forget.
Well, for a lot of people in the C-suite, actually, they need to listen to their children.
Yeah.
They ask great questions, and there's this sort of attitude amongst a lot of quote leaders unquote, where they sort of pat them on the head, saying, Never mind, dear, you'll understand
Mm-hmm.
one day," when actually they're asking great questions or making great observations. You could apply that to a number of the situations going on in the world at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where political decisions are making a nonsense of common sense and ethics.
So another soapbox that I have is the whole debate around generations. I think it is highly problematic that we lump people into groups, label them, um, and leave it at that, that we assign attributes based entirely on the year that you were born. And there's some value to recognizing the variations in experience that we have based on when we were born. But at the end of the day, what we have is the opportunity, especially in today's workplace where so many generations are working side by side, is
It's
to
the
have
first
this.
time with those five.
Yeah, it's pretty magnificent. It is a never before seen opportunity to take fresh perspective and seasoned experience and find the right cocktail, the right blend of perspective, approaches, knowledge, learning. And we are missing out by and large on that opportunity because we label people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a human weakness in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. It's that we need to simplify things because we can't cope with the complications and the complexity in which we
Mm-hmm.
live. So we need to label people. You see someone, you label them friend, foe,
Yep.
black, white, brown, um, tall, short, good looking, ugly, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can move on. And yet, one of the beauties in nature is that everything has its place.
Yeah.
And if we can respect that, an important word, if we can respect that, then we're not trying to change things, or we're not trying to discard things so much as just saying, that's, I see that. I don't necessarily understand it, but it has its place,
Yeah.
and I respect it for that. And how amazing it would be if we treated people the same way.
Right. Well, the labeling that we do, that's that survival level bias that occurs in humans happens in the unconscious mind.
Mm.
As modern day people, particularly people in leadership, we have a responsibility to move into our conscious minds to take the data that the unconscious mind provides us, which it is amazing at doing, and then using it to make choices, not letting it drive the choices and the behaviors, mindsets and behaviors. We can't let what's happening below the surface always drive us. We have to surface it into our consciousness, discern what is actually the right thing, the appropriate wisdom, and then use that thinking to decide how to go forward. And so often when we have to go fast, we miss that process of surfacing the unconscious into the conscious.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Which is why I think one of the most important, if not the most important skill of leadership for the future is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So
no argument here. No argument here. I
so
think that is the foundation.
when we feel something, and of course that in and of itself is that has been a casualty of the way that we've been living. A lot of people don't actually discern their feelings, both emotional but also physical. The body speaks to us all the time, and on the whole, we don't hear it, or if we do, we don't give the time to understanding or allowing the body to speak to us. There's so much knee-jerk reaction that goes on, and you talked about this discernment and that, and I think the concept of what is normal, I think, is a very interesting one to challenge. Because normal is the choice of the majority. So in a lot of societies, what is normal is white heterosexual, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, everything that does not fall into that category is not normal. It's abnormal. And essentially, anything that's normal in these sort of societies is in the minority. And so we have the normal, which is the majority, and we have everything else, which is in the minority. And yet, by sort of making that sort of bipolar choice, we discard so many things that are good. And I think it's really good to acknowledge that the choice of what is normal is one that is done largely out of fear.
100%.
I need to belong. And so in order to belong, I need to conform, and I will therefore give myself to these rules that define me as normal. And as you said, the pattern for me right from the beginning was I didn't actually want to be normal.
Well, that's one of the things that's there is an irony, I mean, a very tragic irony. So many people who are part of that quote unquote normal majority, they do not actually feel, in those quiet moments where they're honest with themselves, they do not feel normal. That is, I think, part of the human condition, that we feel disconnected, like we don't fit, we don't belong. But as you've stated, that creates fear in us. So people will willingly surrender what makes them feel abnormal, where the lack of normality is actually the norm. And we miss this opportunity to benefit from and celebrate how variable, different, and unusual groups of people are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think on the whole, we're pretty lazy as a human race.
We are.
It's just
We really are.
It's much easier just to stick with the normal,
Yeah.
and discard everything else, because it takes effort and time, and a willingness to see things that we don't understand or don't want to understand.
Well, there's a physiological component there, that the processing that we're talking about in the prefrontal cortex requires so much more energy than what happens in the limbic system. So we are we are wired, we are built for that sort of mental laziness because it requires more energy of us. And if you think back where we didn't always have packaged food available to us, for example, the caloric burden of higher level thinking, it was a challenge. And that's not to say that the people who came before us were dumb or lazy. It's no, our bodies are made that so that we conserve energy, and anything else is a risk. So you have to make yourself think in a conscious, inclusive fashion at the end of the day, because that energy takes away from other things your body could be doing. It's really a fascinating, it's an interesting system. And when we think about kind of letting nature run its course in our physical selves, if we allowed that all the time, it would be lazy, biased happenings by and large. Not because people are bad or ill willed, but because that's what keeps us safe and whole. So there is this wildness, this risk that comes with being a conscious leader,
Mm.
because you are tapping into energy and resources that you won't be able to use in other ways. That's exciting. It's exciting to think about it that way. The boldness that it takes to lead in a genuine, authentic, wild way, is pretty exciting. I think if we could define it that way, a lot more people would self-select out of leadership, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, we all have moments when leadership, the responsibility of leadership comes upon us.
Mm-hmm.
If, in a family or at work or just being a citizen. I
Yeah,
think that, I think that you get a number of people who say, "Oh, well, I'm not in a leadership role, so I don't have anything to do with leadership." And yet they go home and they start teaching their child a new skill. That's a leader.
it is. It is.
So yeah.
Yeah. I came up professionally in a healthcare setting, working in HR and people side of hospitals, acute care, and in nursing, at least here in the States, there's a concept of the bedside leader that I love and I have totally stolen as a way to think about leadership in organizations. That you have the opportunity to lead from any place within a company, within a system. And it can be the boardroom, but you can also lead from where you work as well.
Absolutely.
In the choices you make, in your behaviors, how you show up, how you support and even coach your colleagues, that we get to all participate in leading. And I feel like that is a rewilded system where the boundaries around who holds leadership get expanded so there can be a certain level of autonomy. I like where we're at because I feel like it's a pretty natural transition to the next question that I prepared for you, Thom. When we first spoke this spring, one of the concepts that you shared with me that I've manically jotted down was an idea of mutually reinforcing systems, specifically related to organizational culture. So I'd like us to clarify what that concept is. So we're talking about the same thing. And then I'm really curious how leaders can engage their teams in establishing systems like this. They're not just mutually reinforcing, but also mutually beneficial to the people and the organization.
I think perhaps we need to take a step back and look at what is a system.
Yes, sir.
And because you look at problem solving, for instance, in organizations, And uh, often as a consultant, I'm called in and they say, right, here's the problem, we need to fix it. And in 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 the old days, because I felt like I needed to please my clients, I would say, okay, let's look at solving the problem. And over a period of time, I learned that solving the problem doesn't actually do much that's useful or positive in that organizational system. Because, and I like the metaphor of I, doctor, I've got a sore knee. So the
Yes.
doctor puts a bandage on the knee. And eventually the doctor says, look, we can't fix this. You need to go to the surgeon. And the surgeon says, right, we need to do this, that, and the other. Whereas actually, if you go to a holistic practitioner, they will say, let me look at your whole body. And then they say, well, it looks like one of your discs is slightly out.
Hmm.
Your body is compensating and putting more uh, weight and load on that knee, which is why the knee is complaining. So if we sort out your disc,
Hmm.
then then the problem with the knee will go away. And so that's one system. But actually, if you say then, okay, so why is the disc out?
Yes.
Uh, and so there are we live in this world where there are systems within systems within systems, and uh, what one finds in organizations is you ricochet from one solution to a whole series of problems that are generated because of that solution.
Yeah.
And each one of those the consequent problems need a solution. And so there's so much time and effort and energy and money spent on solving things as opposed to actually saying, hang on a minute, where are the roots of these things?
Hmm.
And so I think that again, this is partly because we're in such a hurry that I mean, what was it? There was a statistic I used to use. 35% of a manager's time is spent redoing things.
Oh my.
So if you think about that, I mean, I can't remember what the numbers are, but it's about a day a week that,
Yeah.
that you could save if you actually started to address things. And we come back to what we were talking about, a long time ago, is that allowing space, breathing, and saying what actually is truly going on here, as opposed to what's the manifesting problem, let's solve it.
Yeah. If you
Um,
chase symptoms, a lot of times you never treat the disease. Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
So
that reinforces itself. It's if you are constantly chasing what appears to be the problem and not the root cause, what's going to be reinforced, not only the behavior of deal with the problem now, it's also going to become a problem riddled environment as a result of that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there is an alternative, which is the good news. We don't have to be stuck there.
Nobody takes courage,
Hmm.
because that, in a sense, is where is another aspect of this serenity. For someone just to breathe and say, let's just stop. Let's take a moment to reflect. They say that organizations where their meetings, the first thing a meeting does is to have a moment's or a minute's silence,
Hmm.
just to enable people to be present. When I'm facilitating offsites, which I do quite a lot for leadership teams, I very often say, well, I'd like you to check in and I'd like you to tell me all the reasons why you cannot, in this moment, be fully present.
Hmm.
And you get somebody who says, well, I had a really bad night's sleep and my daughter came in and I barked at her and I'm feeling really bad about that. And so I carry the echoes of that. Somebody else might say, well, this idiot driver cut me up at the traffic lights. And I'm still kind of shaken up a bit by that.
Hmm.
Or somebody might say, well, actually, I've got a project on at the moment, as you all know, but I've got a real tight deadline. And frankly, I'd rather be working on that than being in this meeting. All these kind of things really
Hmm.
enable people to be more present.
It does. Naming things, bringing them into the light like that, it, it stills the noise that they make.
And it acknowledges, somebody may say, well, I've got a pain or I've got a headache or whatever, and I'm finding it really difficult to concentrate. That's not a weakness. And it's not looking for anyone to solve the problem.
Hmm.
It's just saying, that's where I'm at. So I'm going to do my best to be fully present. And it would help me and it probably help you to know that I may lose it occasionally.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, one of the most respectful things somebody could say in a meeting is, look, I think what you just said is really important, but my mind just drifted, and I'm sorry, but I didn't hear it. Would you please repeat that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's magical when we can set our egos aside and do that. Because that's what it takes in those settings a lot of times. It's not just courage, it's also a humility to admit I wasn't present or I got distracted. But as you said, it's highly respectful.
And for people to acknowledge that, when we're all in such a zoom, rush.
Hmm.
And one thing I talk about when I'm talking about the rewilding piece is that I think that particularly in the political world, but also in a lot of organizations, there's this sense about growth. We've got to grow. We've got to keep growing. There are finite resources, and one of the finite resources is the people.
Hmm.
People being expected to be always on call, people being treated as if they are a replaceable resource. We forget that in nature has cycles. We have nature has seasons.
Hmm.
A lot of people actually during winter time feel there's an inclination to hibernate,
Hmm.
but our systems don't allow that. One of the things that I think is just abominable is how women's cycles are not allowed to be spoken about. And in order to survive, an awful lot of women don't talk about these things. They don't actually. Um, I'm in danger of now mansplaining.
What it is, Tom, one, thank you for acknowledging that. But also, sometimes men have to be the ones to talk about this, just like sometimes those of us with privilege have to be the one to acknowledge the problems because we hold that power to make the changes. So, a man saying it is horrible that it's not okay for women to talk about the fact that there is a reproductive cycle that greatly influences their mental capacity, their physical well-being every month. We need men to acknowledge it if that's going to change.
Yeah, and I think we need to make it safe enough for women to acknowledge it as well.
Hmm.
Because an awful lot of them don't, and I've had that conversation with a number of female executives.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm not a woman. I haven't had that kind of cycle. Men have cycles, but they're
Hmm.
far less obvious.
I'm going to wrangle us back into the professional leadership space because I do see a connection, and maybe I'm reaching for it, but it goes back to that linear versus connected approach to how we work with each other, to how we lead. If you're approaching leadership as this is going to be a step by step process, a procedure that you follow that is linear, that depends upon command and control, all of your decisions, all of your choices are going to be made based on that. And you're going to be driven by fear of losing control, of not having power. But if you understand that we are interconnected, that my success is dependent upon your success, that we sometimes have to dive deeper to actually solve root causes rather than playing whack-a-mole with single issues and concerns, that we are connected, that leadership can and should be embedded across all levels of the organization, that our relationships are the method of getting work done. It's going to change how you approach leading and working in that system. And you don't have to be as fearful to maintain your power.
Fear is not a helpful emotion in all of this.
No.
They found that people who are living in fear, their brains don't work as well.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So parts are closed down. So, yeah, fear produces short-term results,
mm-hmm.
Which are very exciting for people who have very short-term goals or sight. But long-term, you foster resistance, you foster turnover of people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get the best out of the people who stay. Actually, when you create a toxic culture, the best people are often the first to leave because they've got other options. Short term, it works. Long term, it really doesn't.
No. Yeah, fear can get results, but you can't sustain them. And you pay a high, high price for it. Culturally, emotionally, sometimes even physically. And that can be in retention, that can be in wellness within the workplace. Frankly, I could get so granular as to make a case for higher insurance costs if you are providing benefits for your people, that if you're creating that sort of stress, you're going to have more payments that are being made into the healthcare system because stress breaks our bodies.
Yeah.
So there's a business case for, frankly, not being a jerk as a leader. Never mind it being the right and moral thing. You can assign like cost to that sort of bad behavior, that toxic leadership and culture.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Thom, your book, I know that we don't have a publication date yet, but you are in some of your final editing. The title right now, and hopefully at publication, is Rewilding the Corporate Mind. I'm looking forward to reading it. For today's conversation, I like us to kind of close up with any sort of last thoughts or observations, things that you want to make certain that you memorialize and that hopefully our listeners take away.
Well, I mean, there's words that we've already used. I think one is presence.
Mm-hmm.
They say that the greatest gift that one person can give to another is their full presence.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're busy and somebody phones and you carry on writing an email to someone else at the same time because you think you can do it, and actually you don't do either of those things justice. But if somebody's on the phone or in person, they know whether you're giving full presence or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is an enormous gift. So I would say experiment with giving people your full presence and notice. We talked about self-awareness. Notice how difficult it is. It might not be, but I suspect for a lot of people it will be very difficult.
The poet Mary Oliver talked about attention being a form of love. And your presence is a gift to people. It is a sign of respect. It is a way to demonstrate you matter. to me.
So another thought. I remember uh, I I did a police driving course years ago, and one of the things you had to do was give a running commentary
Oh,
on what was going on around
okay.
you. There's a white car that's coming up quite fast behind me. It looks like they want to overtake. Not sure there's a bit enough room, so I'm going to ease back a bit to give him the space because my ego allows that. I don't have to have road rage. There's some traffic lights coming up. They've been green for quite a while. I'm just going to ease back rather than trying, so you're constantly talking through all of the moving dynamics around you. It's hard work. It's hard work. Um, but it is that sort of awareness of what's going on around you. And I think that um, one thing that uh, we can really try and do a lot more is just listen. And what's fascinating is for most of us, you might talk about meditation, and everybody gets themselves a little bit sort of uptight about it all, because they think that meditation is clearing the mind, so it's empty, so therefore you are um, just sort of meditating in the purest form of the word. But I think even the best meditators anywhere will say, no, the monkey mind is always operating. It's always there. It's always getting new ideas. What am I going to have for dinner? Oh, I forgot to lock the car. Oh, it's going to rain. Did I leave something out? So it was I didn't leave the washing out. There's this stuff that's going on all the time, and in meditation, they say just acknowledge it as opposed to trying to do anything about it.
Hmm.
So thank you. Uh, I hear you, and now I move on. And so you're not trying to suppress. You're allowing. Now, the more that you can allow like that in a form of discipline, as opposed to just running off with a thought, the more you're able then, when somebody is with you, to really listen in such a way that what they say goes in.
Hmm.
And because we are human beings and our senses are really very developed, except that on the whole, we don't exercise them. We don't exercise those muscles. But at an unconscious level, we still get it. So that when I really truly listen to you, just like the presence bit, you feel heard.
Hmm. And seen.
And seen. Yes. So, and both of those take us back to what is serenity in leadership. That's serenity in leadership.
Hmm. I don't know that I could put it any better myself, Thom. Thank you. This has been a
Mm.
delight. Thank you for every place this conversation has taken us.
Well, likewise. Okay, thank you very much. It's been great speaking with you,
Same.
and thank you for allowing me to explore in this way with you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Thom. Thank you for joining me today. If this conversation sparked something useful, please follow the comfy chairs and leave a review. Those small actions help more people find the show. Got a leadership question you'd like featured in a future Comfy HQ episode? Please send it my way. I'd love to hear what's on your mind. And when you're ready to move from ideas into action, 123 Limited helps leaders build stronger teams, sharper strategies, and better talent plans. Learn more at 123limited.com. That's ONE23LTD.com. Thanks for listening.